Hello, OTCers. Happy Monday. The Nations League 2025 is behind us now. And I really wanted to focus on the host nation, Germany, because they had such a really good feeling for their national team off the back of a really good Euro 2024, which we will come to. I know you're going to say, well, they only made the quarterfinals, so there's a degree of nuance there. We'll come back to that. But Euro 2024 was a lot of what they needed, and they hope to build on that when they were hosting the Nations League in 2025. And it didn't quite work out like that. They lost both games to Portugal and France, finished in last place, and a lot of head scratching in Germany today, and a lot of sense of, are we going to be able to compete in the World Cup in any meaningful sense in 2026? And the strong feeling at the moment has to be no. Germany are nowhere near ready for the 2026 World Cup. And that's despite a lot of eggs being put in the future basket, because I think people were surprised when Julian Nagelsmann took the job anyway. Someone who is young, is still attractive to clubs, has had some success at club level already, of course. And even more surprised, perhaps, that after Euro 2024, he decided to sign on again and stay for a little bit longer, when, again, he could have gone back into the club game after that. But I think there was a feeling on both sides that the Germany project, if you like, was not finished for them or for him. A feeling that his work was not yet done, that he could take them a little bit further. And coming into the semi-final against Portugal last week, he was very keen, Nagelsmann, to say, Portugal are ahead of us. We are only halfway down the road that we want to be on. And I guess he wasn't hoping to be proved so spectacularly right. You know, if there's one real endorsement of how far that off Germany are at the moment of being genuine contenders for this World Cup in 2026, it's maybe the comments of Nagelsmann himself, who came out after the Portugal game and said, okay, well, I can accept that we're not up to the level yet, but it felt like some of the players weren't giving 100%. We need to work out why that is. Now, personally, from a neutral standpoint, I thought this was a little bit harsh. And I think any look at international football and the performance of international footballers needs to be put in the context of where we are in the season. That all these guys, most of these guys are at the back end of 55, 60 games. And I think to provide a consistent, even, excellent from start to finish performance is asking a lot at this point in the season, especially after you've had the emotional crescendo of the end of a season. And especially because, of course, the Nations League is not without meaning. And I think you can see that from the way that players have played, tried to play, responded to situations. I'll not forget in a hurry Florian Wirtz trying to pick, I think it was Bruno Fernandes, up off the floor and get on with the game, and being admonished for doing so in the closing minutes of that defeat to Portugal in the semi-final. But the Nations League is not a European Championship, or it's not a World Cup. It's not the tournament where people, give or take Cristiano Ronaldo after his comments after the final, would go into limping, really. You know, if they're not feeling right, they're not going to play. So I think to expect absolute A+, I will give everything for this moment level is perhaps a little bit unreasonable. And we did see some good things from Germany in this as well. I think we saw in the first half, both against Portugal, where I thought they shaded it before Portugal, and certainly the way that Roberto Martinez managed his team and managed his substitutions in the last half hour plus, really turned the game in the visitors' favour. And in the first half of the third place match against France, I thought Germany came out looking determined, looking keen to force the issue. And you know, maybe if they'd have taken chances, there would have been a few different things to say. The story would have been different. But I think the drop-off in the second half of both those games, even bearing in mind the context, even bearing in mind where these players are, form and fitness-wise, it was really concerning, I think, for Germany, that we're still getting this incredible unevenness. And it's something that was pointed out, going back to that good feeling that they got from Euro 2024, that we're seeing again and again from Germany. That, like, the idea of this German national team is better than the team itself at the moment. Now, I said that Germany got what they needed from Euro 2024, and I really think they did. I don't think we can look at it just in terms of hard results, because what Germany needed before Euro 2024, going into last summer, is for there to be a closer relationship, a rekindling of the relationship between the national team and the general public, which had really fractured for a number of reasons, over a number of tournament failures. And there was this sense that by the 2022 World Cup, the general public in Germany, the general footballing public in Germany, weren't really interested in the national team anymore. We've said this on OTC before, and having spent a lot of time in Germany, I've seen this, the fact that, you know, people during the 2022 World Cup, and part of it was because it was in Qatar and human rights reasons, but it was also the fact that the national team were a turn off for them, the fact that there were no big screens in the major cities, in Berlin, in Cologne, in Munich and Dusseldorf, showing the games, because people just really weren't into it. And post Hansi Flick, this was one of the major jobs of Julian Nagelsmann: get the national team exciting the public again. That's something that's important. And they really managed to do that during the Euros. There was fun, be it Florian Wirtz ranking his best potato dishes on TikTok, which was something that really nonplussed Florian Wirtz, but something that the general public found gave a sort of bit of a human side, a bit of a fun side to the national team. They liked the way they played. They liked the fact that Nagelsmann got Wirtz and Musiala in the same team as dual number 10s. They were fun to watch. But something that's been pointed out in an editorial in Bild today, Monday, is the fact that maybe Germany and its footballing public, because they were sort of blindsided by how fun it was hosting the tournament and the sort of fun football that the team played, which was the most enjoyable for a while, maybe they've mistaken having a great tournament experience for having a great team, because they're definitely not there yet. And we've seen this time. Now, look, I think there are circumstances as well around it, and you know it's the same for all the teams. All these European teams, they're at the back end of a difficult season. But I think when you look at Germany and when you look at the fact they're a developing team, I think you look at them missing out on some key players, one from each line of the pitch. So no Antonio Rudiger in this tournament. No Jamal Musiala, who is their best player. Let's just get that straight. Whatever happens with Florian Wirtz next, and despite the Bayern charm offensive for Wirtz, which doesn't seem like it's worked, Jamal Musiala is their best player. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And an absence that Arsenal have felt quite keenly throughout the season, Kai Havertz. Even though no one can still make their mind up really, seemingly, whether he's just a good player or an elite player, there's no doubt that Germany missed him, because he has been an attacking focal point for them going back into the recent past. He can make stuff happen in the penalty box, and he's got a couple of different facets to his game. So I think those three key players left Germany a little bit directionless in this tournament. There's a lot of debate over how much talent there actually is. I think there's plenty still. Joshua Kimmich is playing at a very good level all over again. Of course, he's just re-signed for Bayern, reached 100 caps in the semi against Portugal. He'll be very important for them. Marc-Andre ter Stegen was rather better than everyone hoped he'd have to be. And honestly, in the second half against France in the third place match, he saved them from a real spanking. He was absolutely back to his best, and underlining that he really is one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Now, I think if we go forward over the next little while, you look at Jonathan Tah moving to Bayern Munich. I feel he'll have a good season and he'll carry on being important for Germany. Nico Schlotterbeck, when he comes back from injury, will be important as well. And, you know, we talked about those injured players coming back. But really, I think we have to drill down and look at the coach. I think we have to look at Julian Nagelsmann, because I think this tournament, much as he is meant to be the bright, young, exciting face of this bright, young, exciting Germany team, he's fallen short on a few occasions here, and the development of this team is his job. There's no doubt about that. He is there for that reason, and I think you look at experimenting with the back three against Portugal definitely didn't work, and then switching back to a 4 again, so it was almost a 4-2-2-2 that comes from the Red Bull sort of era, and it has worked so well when you have Wirtz and Musiala in the same team. That was brought back in for the France game, and as I said, worked quite nicely in the first half. So, given how many defensive problems Germany have had over recent years or recent generations, I suppose you could say, that is something that Nagelsmann really needs to concentrate on, and I think there's a concern there. I think you look at the fact that Roberto Martinez had the tactical drop on Nagelsmann in the second half of that game in the semi-final. That's a concern as well. Now, look, we know Martinez is a capable coach. We've seen it with Belgium as well. His tactics won the World Cup quarter-final against Brazil famously in 2018. So I think he's come out of this tournament, a tournament which he went into with his job under some doubt, by the way, with a lot of credit. But I think it should encourage Nagelsmann to look at himself a little bit and think, what could I have done a little bit better there? And I think this continuous theme of development and improvement and working in the right direction is really important, because performing at the World Cup is important. Of course, it's always important for Germany. But Germany have had a series of poor World Cups since winning it in 2014. They've gone out in the groups at 2018 and in 2022 as well. So they really need to find a way to make significant progress. And look, at the moment, it feels ridiculous to me that we should sit there and talk about them being a contender. When you look at what Spain have, what France have, what Portugal have, what Argentina have, what England have, they can't be considered in that bracket for me. It's not even close at the moment, and a lot needs to change in the remaining 12 months before the World Cup to turn that around, and it will be difficult. But there's still only quite a fragile trust between the German national team and the fans, because they've been let down a number of times in recent tournaments. Now, that's what I meant going back to the beginning by building on that feeling. It's not always about the result, because I think most reasonable fans understand whether it's a World Cup, a Euros, a Champions League or whatever, the manner is as important as the result, because not every team can win a cup competition. But the sense that you're a contender, that the process is right, that you're putting yourself in the mix, those are all important things. And the jury is really out for Germany in terms of that. Now, look, I think the return of Musiala is actually key when we look at what they can do to make themselves genuine contenders next year. So we've already said they've got to sort out the defence. Now, Ter Stegen is an absolute must, and actually it's an absolute must for him to sort out what his Barcelona future is, because there's a bit of disquiet between him and the club. They're bringing in a new goalkeeper, Joan Garcia, and seemingly trying to force out Ter Stegen. Ter Stegen needs to be settled somewhere and performing regularly, because he's so important to Germany for me. They need to work out whether they're using a back four and what they're going to do there. I think if they are going with Tah and Rudiger, that's probably bad news for Nico Schlotterbeck, even though he's just come off the back of an excellent season before he got that serious injury. Of course, he can also theoretically play at left back, but he had a terrible game there in Hansi Flick's infamous last game where they lost heavily to Japan in Wolfsburg before Flick got sacked the next morning. Germany need to work out whether using Joshua Kimmich, whether that's going to be a right back or in midfield alongside Leon Goretzka. And really, it's not about Wirtz and Musiala, because they pick themselves. And when you had Karim Adeyemi, who I rate as a player, and as a sort of de facto replacement in the third place game against France for Musiala, it just didn't work. It really doesn't work. And I think with the system they were playing, it kind of found Wirtz forced more into wide positions. We've seen him drift into those sort of positions for Leverkusen, and he loves that sort of liberty. But it felt like he didn't have enough influence in central areas of the pitch, and that's what him and Musiala, I think, need to have, which obviously demands a lot of the fullbacks, which maybe is a reason for having Kimmich out there as a sort of hybrid fullback / midfield player. But it needs to be about getting the best out of those two, because they are Germany's best two players in a particular order, as I've already established. I think the other real question are the strikers. I don't think there's a really clear answer to that yet. Nicholas Füllkrug has had some great moments, has had an enviable goal-scoring record at the start of his Germany career. There's no doubt about that. I don't think you can play him and Nick Voltemade together. I just don't think that works. So the question is, who is the guy who's going to score you the goals? Because the fact is, over these two games against Portugal and France, they missed a lot of chances. And that would be changing the whole conversation that we're having at the moment. We might be talking about fine-tuning rather than major surgery on the squad, because results obviously dictate about how we talk about a team's progress. I think Deniz Undav will come up and make an impression at some point. Not an amazing second season at Stuttgart last season for a number of reasons, including injury. He is the most natural finisher in this squad. So I think at some point, Nagelsmann is going to have to find a way to include him. If we're to see Germany even get out of the groups, that's the first thing. We can't talk about them being contenders. We have to talk about them getting out of the groups before we start talking about them pushing towards doing something significant in the US, Mexico and Canada next year. Thanks for joining us on OTC Mondays here on YouTube. We always love your company. Who do you think Julian Nagelsmann needs to pick to turn Germany around and make them a contender again? Who would you pick at the back? Who would you pick up front to score the goals that they're lacking at the moment, or at least that they were in the Nations League? You can tell us below the line. You can tell us on the socials as well. OTC Pod is where what we are everywhere. And remember, of course, the podcast itself on the continent is every Thursday in your favourite podcast catcher. Me, Dotun Adebayo, and one of our brilliant team of experts going through all the biggest stories in Europe. And of course, every Friday, just as you respond to us here, you can ask us questions for Ask OTC on Friday. We dedicate the whole pod to answering your questions on what's happening in European football at the moment. So get at us here or on the socials, as I said. We look forward to seeing you again next Monday.